I'm John Weingart. Today is July 31st, 2012, and Fariborz Fatemi is here at the Eagleton Institute to record an interview for the Center on the American Governor. He worked for Byrne from the time he was first running for governor in 1973 through 1978. So let's start. What was the status of the Byrne campaign when you arrived on the scene?
As I recollect, John, I had been helping Dick Coffey, Senator Dick Coffey, who had been who had announced or was going to announce to run for governor. And it was maybe a short few weeks, and then he decided that he's going to get out and in support of Judge Byrne, who was a Superior Court judge at the time on the bench. And Dick Leone, who I had met previously in other campaigns, national campaigns, had asked me to help at Dick Coffey, and then he said, "Why don't you stay?" And I said, "Well, I don't know who this person is and how it's going to fit." And I had been working or running a sort of a small political consulting business out of Washington, and that's how, when Dick brought me in for Senator Coffey. And so I decided that I wanted to go back, and he said, "Well, why don't you go and meet with the candidate to be, and see what you want to do after that." And so I went and met with Judge Byrne, and had a very cordial, good meeting with him. A very kind person, and I thought to myself that he looked like someone's perception of a governor. He was very direct, very courteous, very kind, and that maybe I ought to do this because my roots were in New Jersey. My parents lived in New Jersey, and I had been away teaching at Wayne State University, assistant professor of government, and I had been in political campaigns, national campaigns, helping Robert Kennedy and Hubert Humphrey and Ed Muskie and George McGovern and so forth, so the whole list.
And it was time to work for a winner.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so New Jersey interested me, so I said, "Okay, fine, I'll stay." Mm-hmm. And what was interesting about that, we were talking a little bit about it before, people kind of lump campaigning and campaigns together. And in this situation, I noticed that what we needed to do, which we kind of worked it out, was that not only have a campaign where you have the headquarters, the research, the fundraising, the money, and all of those things that goes with a full-fledged campaign, but we needed to perhaps put a campaign around the governor himself, what I call the zone of comfort, so that when he went out, he would, or the future governor, that when he went out, he would be very comfortable in what he was going to do. And how we did that was that Dick asked me to be the trip director for him, to travel with him, and to put some advanced people, build an advanced team around him. And with the driver and with the scheduler, Paul Goldman, who came into the campaign, Dick brought him in, that we would have sort of a unit all onto ourselves, and we would then do all that's necessary to make sure that everything that the candidate did was at the best of our ability to prepare the way for him, and the best of his ability to be able to present himself to the public.
And I think this was his first time running for office.
I think this is his first time running for office. It was, he had been involved in politics before, but never in campaigning. And he had what we could say a unique lifestyle. He was a Superior Court judge. He was an assignment judge. He didn't like staying out late. He had his own lifestyle. He had his own and his family life, and so all of a sudden, people are making demands on his time. All of a sudden, you get into a campaign 7 days a week, all that stress, constantly trying to be your best at all times. He didn't enjoy, as I could perceive it, the backslapping and the glad handing and all the other things that goes with a campaign. There are others who are natural at that, but he was not. And so we had to compensate for that. And we built this zone of comfort around him. And that, I think, was a first and very unique in New Jersey. And I thought very successful what we had done, much to the credit of our advanced people. And that's a whole other story. We went out and recruited people. I think we had some 10, 12 candidates to begin with, and narrowed it down to 4 or 5 people. As I recollect, the people who made the cut was Ira Dorfman, Jeff Warren, Russ Wilkinson, Frank Pfeiffer, Tony Tolles. I think those were the basic unit that stayed with us and stayed in the campaign. And not only did they have to do the advance work, and I'll explain what all that was all about, but we also had to do the driving. Mm-hmm. And through some friends of the campaign, we had some cars donated to the advance staff, and so every day that we set up a schedule. And now to backtrack a little bit.
Well, let me
Sure, I'll stop.
Because I like to focus at least initially on Brendan Byrne
yes.
as a candidate.
Right.
So when you say you set up this zone of comfort around him, were there certain would you keep him, try to steer him towards certain kinds of events and away from others because that was his strong suit?
Right.
So well, what would you keep him away from?
Yeah, John, well, we didn't know what his strong suit would be. Mm-hmm. And so what we had to start out to do was to start out slowly and develop whatever he was going to do. So, for example, you'd put him in a set sort of thing. Let's say a county was having a event, and so there would be naturally people there, naturally be very open to him since the county had endorsed him, and then he would go in and shake hands and greet people and that sort of thing. But there was a period of, I think he announced in late April of 73, and the primary was in June. So we had maybe a window of a few weeks for that. But fortunately, now, this is 1973, so there was not much television, some radio, and print. And the papers generally didn't follow you till you had the general election or whatever they decide to the last few days of the campaign they would come. So in a situation like this, he had already been endorsed by the Hudson County organization, by the Mercer County organization, Middlesex, because Ed Craybill was going to run and then he decided not to, and Senator Jerry English, who had been working with Ed Craybill, joined our campaign, and Mercer County, of course, Dick Coffey, we were his people, he brought us in, and then you had the Hudson County people, and Ken McPherson was involved with us, and then James Dugan later, and then the Bergen County, Jerry Breslin was on board right from the beginning. So there was a good, or Don Land at Union County, mm-hmm. and so there was a good basis of support to begin with, and so this would get us through the primary. And of course we had Senator Rolf DeRose running against us, and
Ann Klein.
Ann Klein, who later became a commissioner in the governor's cabinet. So. What we did was we started to put a schedule together, Paul Goldman, myself, and Dick, and all the others involved, as to what the first steps would be. And then so we would send our advance people out 24, 48 hours ahead of time. And so they would be looking at the event, making sure everything is prepared, making sure that the sound systems work, making sure how he's going to enter the room, making sure if you needed an audience, what that audience would be, and all of that. And then the drivers, since there were no GPS at that time, we would go out and run the route ahead of time and convey all that message back to the scheduler, so he would know exactly how long it took from point A to point B, how long the event would be, how long would it be to the next event, and so forth and so on. And so constantly we had this back and forth going, and people going out ahead of time, and then the drivers and so forth. And in the meantime, then we would have to do the schedule. So when we did the schedule, the advanced person who had already advanced this the day before or 48 hours before would then take us through it. And he would have communicated with me all the traps or all the problems, and we would have resolved all of that before we got there. And then I would brief the candidate in the car as to what he faces and what he's going to, who he's going to meet and so forth. Now, this is all very, very complicated in this sense, that when the advanced person went out, he had certain things to do. He or she had certain things to do. They had to notify...
Let me go back to that a second.
Yes,
was the campaign mostly male in 1973?
Well, yes, in the beginning.
Yeah.
The advanced people were mostly male. Mm-hmm. In the next campaign, with the 76, 77 campaign, we had a couple of females also who helped us. But what happened was that we would ask them to make sure that they would call the relevant political people in the wherever we were going in that area. That they would notify the press people that we were coming, even though our press office has already done that, to give them a little bit more, detail and so forth, and see if we could get some press to come. To notify any other prominent Democrats who were not part of the party structure, but were Democrats nevertheless, to make sure that they knew that the candidate was going to be there. So all of that preparation would be going on, and then we would arrive, and he would go through the steps of campaigning. What we set up was a lot of meet and greets. That means, you come in, you meet people, you greet people, and you would go out.
And so that means like fewer formal speeches or speaking.
That's right. And the formal speeches were basically at events where county events, events that an ethnic group would want him, or some set event, whatever prominent group, an Irish group, and any group, and so forth. All these different other groups that are asking for speakers, and especially when you're a candidate, if you have some contacts and you can get him in there so that people could see him. Again, you had name recognition. Now, this is just the beginning of starting of the use of television and starting the use of radio and print to make our case. So, and now, again, you have to also realize that while we're doing all of this, there was no cell phones, there were no computers, there was no email, no Twitter, none of those things. So we had to sort of uniquely come up with our own communication system. And something I had learned in doing advanced work for the national campaigns, other campaigns, what we would do is I would tell them to find a phone booth, the closest to the event, put an out of order sign on it, assign a volunteer to be there, give that number to me, give that number to the scheduler, give it to the driver, make sure we all are on, working off the same number. And so if there is something to be passed back and forth, we had instant communications that way. And so we went around, and that's the way we maintained our communications all over the state. The other thing we had to do, which was I thought not unique to New Jersey, but to help ourselves and the candidate, we put together 21 books of the 21 counties. And it was almost like a travel guide with every source and information that you would want, maps and everything, names of the opinion leaders and the names of the people and so forth and so on. So that at a glance in the car, we could say, this in this county, this is what's prominent, the high school won the football championship, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. As much information as we could gather so he could have that information at his fingertips. And at the same time, the advanced people had gone out. They would come back with information. They would give it to me. And then I could add on to it and say to the candidate, Judge, you're going to meet this person and you're going to see this person. And that person is going to be at the car. And these are the people you ought to single out for recognition, and so forth and so on, as he was putting his comments together. And we would also stage events where he would want to speak on a certain issue, what his position was. We would find, let's say we wanted to do something on the environment. So we would find a brown spot that needed help, and he would make his statement there that this should not be here in New Jersey, and when I'm governor, this is what I'm going to do to change it, and so forth and so on. So it was a combination of a lot of things that we put together like that.
Now, when you got here early in 1973 or March or April, there was an incumbent governor who was running for re-election, Bill Cahill. He hadn't yet lost the primary, so Byrne was essentially challenging an incumbent. Did you think he was a long shot and could possibly win, or had a good shot of winning, or what did you think when you was just going to be the next one in your string of unsuccessful campaigns?
Right. My sense was that he would win, and I tell you why. Because Governor Cahill, unfortunately, Robert Kennedy used to say, in politics, it's 99% luck and 1% skill. And you may have the best candidate in the world, and every time he goes out or she goes out, it rains on their parade. And so it was a situation where Cahill had had a lot of problems with people in his administration who had been accused of wrongdoing. And so there was a problem with him, and we knew he was going to get primaried. And the people who were going to be sort of our opponents turned out to be not as such. I don't take any. We're always running one vote behind, no matter where we are, as far as I'm concerned. So it wasn't like taking it lightly, but I think that given the situation, given the fact that word had gotten out that from the Valachi papers, the tapes that had come out, that Brendan Byrne was the one person they couldn't buy, all of that going in his favor, and it was just a matter of getting the message out, making sure that as he goes out, because he didn't have the campaigning experience, because it didn't come naturally to him, because he just didn't like it, it was one of those situations that if we could minimize any mistakes on the campaign trail, then we had a winning candidate here. And as it turned out, it wasn't just winning, it was overwhelmingly winning.
Now, there's I don't know if there's folklore, but a school of thought that Brendan Byrne is now, since he left being governor, is known as a very witty raconteur speaker,
right?
And that was not on the impression is that was not particularly on display when he was governor. And I wonder whether it was when he was a candidate, and whether you thought it was when he was in his first years as governor. When you
that's a good question. Looking back, my sense is because as we were going forward, all effort was being made to make sure that he was well prepared, and he was a quick study, and he adjusted well. There were times, there were a lot of stress. There were times, but I think that as much as he disliked it, he adjusted to it, and he did what he had to do to win. His wit was there right from the beginning. He used to tell stories about living on Nymph Road, which was his address when he was judge, and but he wasn't an inspiring speaker as you're used to on a national basis or even on a state basis. But I think that it was always there, and it just developed more and more. And when he became governor, he was so involved in all the different specific issues that he was trying to help the state with, that there were never the opportunity for him. Once the income tax was passed, there was a lot of difficulty with that, the understanding of the public on it, the job that we did in terms of maybe explaining it and people not liking it, and the couple of years that it took to try to get it through, even though it was the best thing for the state in order to be able to meet the requirements that were presented constitutionally. My sense was that it was always there. And some people undervalued it in a sense, that underestimated what he could do. This is not to say that when we were out on the campaign trail, that there were times when he felt he was overscheduled, and there would be the back and forth with me and others, of tension on that, and we had to work through that. This is not to say that there were times when he didn't. He felt that he didn't want to really do the campaigning, but then he felt that it's necessary to do it. So he, let's say, he's kind of gritted his teeth and he did it. And so, we were able to work that through. But I think the reason we were able to work that through was that he was willing to give and we were willing to give, because a campaign wants him everywhere at all times. And we had to adjust to that. And I'll give you an interesting example on how we got around it. We would go to these county dinners, and of course, everybody had to be introduced, everybody has to speak, dinner would be served at 9 or 10 o'clock, people would be speech to death and all of that, and they would want him to sit there on the podium. And he would never want to do that. And so the instruction to me and the way we told it to the advanced people was, it's meet and greet, eat and get out, or meet and greet, speak and leave. And so at every event we had to work with the host, because the host obviously didn't like that. So we had to negotiate. Everything was a negotiation. I had to get involved myself sometimes. Advanced people had to negotiate. I had to back them. I said, no, we can't change that. He's going to come in, he's going to greet the people, he's going to speak, and he's going to leave. And that's the only way we can do it. And he doesn't stay for dinner, and he doesn't do the other things and so forth. And so when that didn't happen, because there were occasions when once he was there, he would be trapped, and no matter how I tried to get him out, it would be extremely difficult and embarrassing. And then he would really be angry. And that's what we didn't want to do, because you want to keep things as calm as possible so that it doesn't carry over into the next day where he has to perform again. And because it is every day he's on a stage. And that's what I try to explain to our advanced people. Same thing, that don't get into this job unless you love insecurity, because every day you're right there and you make a mistake, and not only the candidate sees it, but everybody in the state sees it. And that becomes a big, big thing. So if you don't like insecurity and you're not going to perform at your highest at all times, do something else. There are a lot of other things you can do in a campaign. And this sort of became an elite group, and there were others who always wanted to get in and to be part of the operation. And so Jeff Warren once said to them, when they kept asking, well, can we become an advanced person too? Can we get into this and so forth? And he said to them, you know, what's not to like? You get nominal pay, you have a chance to see New Jersey, and get abused all the time.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask, to jump around a little bit, so
Sure.
you spent much of the first term once he was elected working in the state of New Jersey's Washington office.
Right.
And then you came back to the state for the governor's re-election campaign.
Right, I did.
Was he a better candidate, a different candidate 4 years later? After, I mean, I know there are a lot of questions and issues about that second campaign, but
Right. Not really.
No, okay.
He was a good candidate because he'd already gone through it once.
Mm-hmm.
But the parameters were still the same. He still didn't want to stay out late. He still chafed at being overscheduled. And we would go from 7 in the morning. He would have meetings. Just to run you through, John, for a minute. For example, he would have meetings at his home, and then we would get on the campaign trail, as so-called, and we would have maybe a press event so that we could make the papers, or the early papers, and then or we would have a press event later in the afternoon. But there would be something mid-morning, and then it would be something at a luncheon, a fundraiser, perhaps, that he would go to somebody's home, or somebody would be doing the event. We had a whole fundraising operation that had their own schedule and fit it in with our schedule. And then we would have a meet and greet, and then we would have another event and maybe another fundraiser. And so the day went on, and everybody was in each other's face, and we had to communicate. I remember I would meet with my colleagues on the advanced staff and the scheduler and others at early in the morning and late at night, and trying to prepare for the next day and compensate for what did not happen before, or what should have happened and didn't happen, and so that it doesn't happen the next time. And so constantly we were going over things and going through things as we went through this process. And my sense is that we were able to do a kind of a job that got him the results that it did in the end. Of course, it wasn't just this and his campaigning, but it was also everything else behind him, the media, the television, the fundraising, all the other things that, the issues, all the other things that went into building this campaign.
So when you came back to New Jersey, had he already decided to run for re-election, or was that still a question at that point?
I almost came back a year before that.
Okay.
And I went to represent him with Madeline Berry Thompson in Washington, and she did all this substance, and I did the politics of things. And after, I think about a year and a half, he asked me to come back, and I started again to travel with him. And I would do both. I would go back and forth once or twice a week, and whenever he had some event or some schedule that was necessary for me to be with him, I would be with him. And then it became more and more, and then as we got into the 77 campaign, I basically spent most of the time on that.
So when you were traveling with him, the income tax had already been passed, and there was
yes, right. Well, part of that I also helped with. I came back and forth on some of the appearances he made, and some of the politics of that too, helping with the congressional delegation and others who had advice, and some of the county chairs and some of the others who I had known through the campaign, had built up relationships. There was a lot of resistance on the part of some of the assembly and state senators in terms of voting for it. So, I got involved on trying to work on some of those things.
Well, at that point, once it was passed, he was doing very badly in the polls. But I'm wondering, was that apparent when you went out on the road with him? Was he getting a lot of hostility from the public?
The polls said one thing, but I had a different sense about it. I had a different sense that there were a lot of people out there who respected his diligence, his steadfastness, being steady, and they felt good with having him as the governor of the state. There was no problems in the state in terms of corruption or anything like that. It's given a whole different face to New Jersey. Had brought in a lot of progressive things into the state. Had passed a lot of progressive things. And so even though he used to joke that when I went out, the people used to wave to me with their 5 fingers, now it's only with 1 finger. So even so, but I just felt that there was a group out there that wasn't showing itself in the polls, but at the same time felt very comfortable with him as their governor. And I was a very strong advocate of his, running for a second term. And as was his brother, Dr. Byrne, and others. There were others who were less sanguine, but that's a different thing that I want to get into in the next round. That when we talk about the 76, but it's the 73. John was unique in a sense that we brought a different kind of a campaign to New Jersey. The television that Garth did was...
That's David Garth.
Yeah, David Garth, who then in the 76 campaign, he was one of the doubters whether we could win, and so he formed a company that was his company, but not really associated with his name, so that if we lost, then he didn't have to worry about that. There were a lot of people who sort of kind of said, "Oh yeah, I support you," but kind of went and hid. Mm-hmm. But and it was a different campaign. Dick Leone did not, although he was the eminence grace above everything all the time, he did not run that campaign. Henry Luther was our campaign manager at that time, and Paul Goldman had left, and Ira Dorfman became our scheduler. Most of the people, let's see, Frank Pfeiffer, Tony Tolles, and Russ Wilkinson had gone, and Jeff Warren was one of the returnees from the 73 campaign to help out. And then we had recruited some others who helped us out, Marianne Rogers, and some others I'll get into later on.
Mm-hmm. There are often prominent national politicians of both parties, or at least politicians who hope to be prominent, who come to New Jersey during a gubernatorial campaign, in part because it's an off year and there's not a lot of other places to go. But was that true? Were there a lot of people coming in on behalf of Byrne in 73 and 77?
Oh, yes,
wanted to run for president, or whatever they wanted to
do? In 73, I remember Senator Joe Biden came in to help at fundraisers, and let me see, did Walter Mondale come in? And there were other prominent Democrats, but I don't recollect at the time. It was really, our concentration was basically here, but for some fundraisers we had some people. But Joe Biden was one of the ones who came in early at that time. And it's interesting you mentioned this, and I'll bring this up again later on, but he was also the one who in early October of 77, called the governor and said, I was doing a poll in my own state, and I put your name in, and we did some polling in New Jersey, and you're ahead of Bateman by 8 points. And this is a time when all the other polls had us down by 8 points. Mm-hmm. And so it was, we were going like this, and he was going like this. Whereas in September and October, if you talk to anybody in the state, we were done with. You know, we had no chance. And I remember that Walter Mondale came in to help us, and we took him to Cliffside Park and with Mayor Jerry Calabrese. And
so he was vice president by then?
Yes, he was vice president at that point.
Yeah.
President Carter came in. He came in once or twice in that period.
I think as governor, Brendan Byrne had been the first governor to endorse Carter for president.
Yes, that's
so
right. That's right.
Bond,
And that was one of the things that we had done to even qualify him under the matching funds. We were the first governor to help him qualify under the matching funds.
Carter.
That's right. He was governor, or either he had left the State House or he was still governor. He came in with Jody Powell. And I remember that we took him and he stayed at Morven at the governor's residence. And Jody and I went off to some other place. I was very disappointed in subsequently in what Carter's support of us, and I think he figured that we weren't very popular, so he was not going to, it wasn't one of those profiles encouraged to stand up and say, to the people who were booing or opposing, what are you doing? This is one of the best governors you've ever had. You should be applauding him. He should be, reelected by acclamation and that sort of thing. But I think that they did what they could within their own, political and I remember that his wife came in a couple of times for fundraisers and events like that. So Rosalind Carter, so she was here.
Let me ask you one final question for me, and then if there's more things you want to say, that's good. But you had the experience having worked in presidential campaigns. Was there any significant talk of Brendan Byrne running as a national candidate?
Absolutely. Once we were elected, by the margin we were elected, there was all sorts of talk in 74 and 75 of a potential vice president and a future president, all kinds of talk, as there is now, as you see with other candidates in the Democratic and the Republican Party. But once the income tax passed and sort of the doom and gloom came in with it, then it sort of fell off. But there was in the beginning a lot of talk, significant victory, attractive, someone who could be on the national stage, had the right people around him, the right sort of things going on for him, and so there was a lot of talk like that about him.
Okay. Well, good. Is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
I think that to give you a flavor, maybe if you think it's necessary, to give you a flavor of the advance, I'd like to maybe just do two things. One is to tell you about our first event, and I've written that, and I hope that you use that. The first event, we wanted to get him used to what campaigning is going to be like and meet and greet is going to be like.
So this is back in 73.
That's right. This is back in 73. And so we picked out the Lindenwold line, which is the line between Philadelphia and New Jersey, South Jersey, goes back and forth, commuters all the time and so forth. And the idea was that there would be no press or very little press, since we're out of the range of the New York market,
right.
And Philadelphia doesn't care, and Pennsylvania doesn't care, and also that it's one of those set situations with people coming and going all the time, and so we'd have a ready-made crowd. We don't have to do much with that, and he could get a feel of what it's like to be out there. And so we spent a lot of time, the advance team spent a lot of time on it. I even went out myself and checked it. And so the day of the event, we had checked the timetables, what the time the trains came, when they left, how quickly they let the passengers off, what was the best place to stand, how to do it, because passengers are going home, they don't care, they don't want to meet a candidate, so they think what to do, and how to block them to make sure that they meet him. And so we went through all of that and decided that how we were going to do it. And so we went there and we set up. People were up front with signs. We had kind of a funnel that to try to get people to go through the funnel. That they would be told that meet the next governor of New Jersey, Brendan T. Byrne, and his job was to grab them and shake their hands and say, "I'm Brendan T. Byrne, and I hope you will support me. I want your vote," that sort of thing. And if some people wanted to chat, stop and chat with them, that sort of thing. So we went. We thought we had everything set up, and the first train stops, and the people get off, and they come rushing through, and it was almost as if you were in a stampede. There was a herd of buffaloes coming at you, and you didn't know whether to run or stand your ground or get run over or what to do. And if he touched or spoke to half a dozen people, I would be exaggerating. So, I said, this is not going to work. This is, and he's going to think, where did they bring me? What is this stuff? Mm-hmm. And I had said to him, I said, this is what you have to do, Judge. You have to go and grab them and stop them and say who you are and ask for their vote and look them straight in the eye and hard handshake. So I went out ahead at about maybe 10, 15 feet ahead of them, maybe a little further. And as people came, stopped them and said, "Meet the next governor, meet the next governor, meet the next governor," and then sort of slowed them down and funneled them into him. And then he started doing that. And so the first round, he had said to me, "How am I doing?" I said, "Governor." And I said, "Judge, not so well. We're not meeting many people. No one knows who you are. So we got to do something." So then the second round, he always loved to say, "How am I doing? How am I doing?" So in the second round, I said, "Doing great, doing great." And then the rest of it is all history, because he's such a quick study. He picked right up, and I know he didn't like doing it, mm-hmm. and it wasn't something that came natural to him, but he picked right up, went right in, and started doing it. And we spent an hour, and it was enough. And you could see our advanced people were getting tired, and he wanted to keep going. And I said, "No, this is enough for the first round," and that was the first event. Now, I want to tell you about a couple of things a couple of funny things that happen. No matter how you do, how much you do to make sure everything goes right, and something always comes up. And this is what I would tell the advanced people. That never assume. If you assume that everything's going to go wrong. Mm-hmm. So build in redundancy. And to give you an example of that, at the Garden Arts Center, the ethnic groups, the Irish, the Polish, all the different groups would hold their festivals, do different things. And there was wonderful places to go, have the candidate introduced, and for him to meet and greet people, and for them to get to know him and that sort of thing. So we did one event, and it had all been worked out. And as you know, the Garden Arts Center has so many entrances. Mm-hmm. And where the advanced person was going to be as we drove up, and this had been worked out with the driver. And I knew where that was and all of that. And so day of the event, we arrived, no advanced person. So how's the person at the podium going to know that we have arrived to announce us? And so it was one of those moments where it was time to panic, but it was time not to panic. Mm-hmm. So I said to the candidate, I said, wait a moment while we get them ready for them to announce you, stay in the car and I'll be right back. And so I went out and got one of our field people who happened to be there, thank God, and said, please run up, tell them we're here, and then come back and take a couple of those signs that you have and lead us in right down the middle. And let's go. And of course, as all things are, he wants to get it over with. He's impatient. So I'm trying to keep things calm. And I said, just let's wait a couple of moments till they announce you. And so let's get out of the car, but don't go yet. So once they announce you, and fortunately, that person got to the podium, got the candidates, got the person's attention, had the candidate announced, and we walked in, and he had been announced, and people were clapping, and some people were turning around curious, and we took him right down the middle, and he shook hands with everybody, and a few words of greeting, and then we came back out, and we went back out. And so now you can imagine if he had been on his own or just with a driver, and that kind of a situation happens, and there had been no preparation. And even though we had done all the preparation, these kinds of things would happen. Mm-hmm. And so you had to be able to improvise, and that was one of the things that had to be drummed in over and over again to our advanced people, and they learned, and they did, as we went along, that these kinds of things, these kind of situations happen. You just improvise and you go, and then you go on to the next event. And there are a number of other episodes like that I can go through, but I've done a little note on this, and so maybe you could include that in there.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for this time.
Thank you. Thanks, and I appreciate your having me here, and
it's a pleasure.
You're doing this. Thank you.